The door swung open with a loud noise, and Nicholas appeared in the doorway of their marital bedroom, clearly disappointed not to find his wife in bed. "Lydia, why did you get up so early? It's Sunday, after all. Come on, hop back into the warm bed." I made an effort for a reason. I really wanted to please my beloved wife today. "So, you're simply obliged to have breakfast in bed today," he urged. Lydia didn't want her husband to beg her, so she dove under the covers, and Nicholas began fussing around her. "Although my culinary skills are quite modest, I think you'll enjoy these crispy toasts with chocolate spread," he said, deftly arranging miniature plates on the bedside table. Lydia eagerly devoured the calorie-laden toasts, washing them down with strong coffee. "Darling husband, you're a genius. I'll never forget this breakfast in bed. But one little thing bothers me. Why are you suddenly being so sweet today?" she inquired. Nicholas made a dramatic face. "I simply want to lull your vigilance, so that later, after this breakfast, which I must note I prepared myself today, I can whisk you away for the entire day." Emulating her husband, Lydia made a comical grimace. "I hope this goal of yours doesn't threaten my life because I'm still young and beautiful. So, I have a lot of interesting things ahead," she quipped. Lydia set the empty cup on the porcelain tray. "What's on your mind? Share the details. Don't keep me in suspense," she demanded. "No, I'm a monster, and I'll make you suffer," Nicholas teased. He took the tray and headed for the door, speaking in a more normal tone. "We need to discuss a very important matter, but I don't want to rush it. So, I made some secret arrangements with Mandy and organized a day trip out in nature." "You mean a weekend getaway?" Lydia inquired. "Yes," Nicholas replied. "I'm in," she said with enthusiasm. "All right, you have a little over an hour. I've already prepared a picnic basket, so all you need to do is freshen up yourself and our little princess. A car will pick us up at precisely 9 o'clock, Nicholas informed her. Nicholas elegantly bowed and slipped out of the room. Lydia indulged in the sweetness of this Sunday morning once more, stretching herself before getting out of bed. She quickly tidied up the bed and went to the nursery to wake up their daughter. However, the little girl was sitting on a small chair, looking content and attempting to put on her tights, even though they were inside out. "Mom, I did it by myself. Do I look good?" she asked. Although her clothes were a bit mixed up, Lydia praised her. "You're amazing. Everything looks great, but can I give you a little help?" "Sure," the little one agreed. Imitating the adults, the young girl laid out her plan for the day. "Mandy is going to eat now, and then we're going for a walk." Her mother embraced her and tenderly kissed the top of her head. "My happiness. We're going for a walk with Daddy, and we might even take a little ride in the car." The little girl wriggled out of her mother's arms and hopped around in excitement. "Mom, where are we going? To Grandma and Grandpa's?" "No, Mandy. Daddy wants to show us a magical forest." Mandy's blue eyes widened in surprise. "Will there be a princess and an evil queen there?" "No, Daddy already chased away the evil queen, and a kind fairy with some little dwarfs is waiting for you. So, we need to get ready quickly so we don't keep them waiting." At 3.5 years old, Mandy was a very advanced child. She quickly memorized not only children's rhymes but also other information. However, her primary passion was drawing, and she spent all her free time bringing her fantasies to life on paper. She approached the news of the upcoming trip with a sense of purpose. In her little backpack, she stuffed an album and some markers. "Mom, can I bring these? I want to draw the sun and some flowers," she requested. "Of course, my dear, you can. Just don't bring too much. Otherwise, Daddy might get upset," her mother replied. The girl was about to add a couple of her favorite dolls to her travel kit, but after her mom's warning, she sighed and set her little friends aside. Even at such a young age, the little girl knew better than to upset her dad. Lydia and her husband tried to raise their daughter with a balanced approach, not too strict, but with moderate adherence to her little whims. The grandparents, on the other hand, were categorically against this approach and even tried to indulge their granddaughter's every whim in secret. The parents immediately put a stop to such attempts, which sometimes left the older generation feeling hurt. Little Mandy learned very early on how to use the conflicts between the two generations to her advantage, which occasionally led to disputes about parenting. While they hadn't escalated into serious conflicts yet, The young parents were under no illusions that such a turn of events might be possible in the near future. As they finished their preparations, Lydia asked her husband, "I hope you didn't tell your parents about our plan to take us out into nature. If I had revealed my plan, they would have been here in full force at 5 a.m. My mom is against forest outings because of all the harmful insects, which she considers dangerous for a child." Lydia sighed in solidarity with her husband. "Mine thinks just sitting on a bench near the house is enough. She even considers playgrounds dangerous. I must admit, I don't know how to shield Mandy from the bad influence of our grandparents. They are sure to spoil her." "That won't happen because I know an effective way to solve this problem," her husband assured. The young woman left her stubborn bag alone for a moment and playfully grabbed her husband by the chest. "Nicholas, can you stop speaking in riddles? My brain might explode from the tension. Come on, tell me, what have you planned?" Nicholas was practically bursting with excitement, and he spoke in a solemn tone. "Soon, we'll be taking a family trip to another country. A few months ago, I received a tempting offer, and The smile quickly vanished from Lydia's face. "And you're telling me this now? Didn't you think that I have plans too?" "Lydia, what kind of plans could you have? You only returned to work 6 months ago after maternity leave. Besides, what prospects does a junior research scientist have?" "Normal prospects, Nicholas. Not everyone is born with a halo over their head. Some of us have abilities too. I've been appointed as the head of a research group, and we're currently conducting a series of experiments that might be groundbreaking." Nicholas smirked. "My dear, I understand your enthusiasm, but all the important discoveries in science were made a long time ago. Not all of them. And why are you talking to me in such a condescending tone? I might get offended." "Sorry, my love. I didn't tell you right away about the possible appointment to a team of researchers working abroad because there were too many applicants for that one single position." Lydia, still in a somewhat resentful tone, asked, "They specifically approved your candidacy?" "Yes, they did. You know, I didn't expect it myself. The boss said we need to make way for the younger generation. By the way, he mentioned you as well. He said that for a young family like ours, this trip would be a great opportunity for career advancement." "Your boss is right about something, but my work is here. Nicholas, I've been entrusted to lead a research group, and we're at the very beginning of our experiments. It would be a sudden departure. I don't want to dampen your spirits, but I'm sure that without you, the work in your lab will continue. They'll find a capable person to lead the group. If I understand you correctly, you're putting me in a position of choosing between work and family. No, I will never resort to ultimatums. If your research means more to you, you can stay. But you need to understand that the existence of our family will be at stake. Personally, I don't want to lose both of you." Lydia fought for a moment and then, in a subdued voice, promised, "Nicholas, I need some time to think about all of this. Unfortunately, time is running out because we need to prepare the documents soon. Will a week be enough for your deliberations?" Lydia didn't get a chance to answer because there was an insistent knock on the door. Nicholas cast an expressive glance at his wife. "It's the driver. We've been chattering too much. I wonder where our Mandy is. Mandy, hurry over here. A beautiful little car is waiting for us." The little girl peeked out from the kitchen. It turns out she had been nearby during her parents' discussion. She dragged her stylish backpack along the floor, with an album peering out of it. The head of the family glanced at his wife. "I see that you and Mandy live by the principle of carry everything with you. I asked not to bring any extras. Is an album and some markers such a heavy burden? Let the child develop. Drawing is her favorite activity. Can't we allow her that little pleasure?" The man didn't respond and picked up the bags in the basket before hurrying downstairs. In the car, there were already other passengers, the Thomas family, who were Nicholas' colleagues. Lydia had some acquaintance with Mrs. Thomas, and the women chatted throughout the journey about pleasant things, fashion, weather, and a new way to make jam quickly. Sunday passed by unnoticed. The adults had a picnic in the fresh air while little Mandy was busy drawing. Her parents tried not to interrupt her creative process. Only once did Nicholas ask his daughter, "Mandy, what's this up here?" The face of the young artist was also painted, resembling that of an Indian. The little girl patiently explained to her father, "This, Daddy, is a fairy, And this is her little daughter. See how beautiful their house is, and here's the sun." Nicholas was surprised. "You've made a very big sun." "It's not usually that big." "It can be. It's big so the fairy doesn't get cold." Lydia intervened in the creative dispute. "What are you two arguing about?" The girl showed her drawing to her mother. "Daddy said that there's no such sun," and she looked ready to burst into tears. The woman cast an expressive glance at her husband. "Did you have to upset the child to tears? Let her draw however she likes." Lydia then took the little girl in her arms. "Sweetie, you made an excellent son. Daddy was just joking," Nicholas sarcastically remarked. "Well, now I'm in trouble because I tried to explain the right things to the child." Lydia gave her husband a serious look. "Nicholas, she's just 3.5 years old. She has her own world, and in that world, fairies live, and the sun can be as big as she wants. Small children don't need realism. We should let them stay in their fairy tales for as long as possible." The argument escalated, and Thomas and his wife observed the family scene with concern. Lydia noticed this and, in a conciliatory tone, asked, "Nicholas, let's stop this argument. We can discuss this at home." The man remained silent but quickly began packing his things. On the way back, there was silence in the car. Even the usually talkative Thomas's wife retreated to a corner and stayed silent. The spouses spent the rest of the evening apart. After dinner, Nicholas settled in front of the television while Lydia tended to their daughter. Lydia had trouble falling asleep for a while because some unpleasant thoughts plagued her. Before drifting off to sleep, she thought to herself that the most fragile thing in the world was a marriage. It takes just one careless word or wrong action, and this structure begins to crumble. On Monday morning, Lydia woke up with a nagging feeling of dissatisfaction. Her husband was still asleep, so she went to the kitchen. Images from the previous day's outing flashed in her mind, and she muttered softly, "It was all over nothing. We argued because of a child's drawing." Nicholas entered the kitchen, and Lydia said, "I hardly slept last night. We argued over nothing yesterday." "Lydia, I'm sorry. I guess I was wrong." The woman appreciated her husband's noble gesture as he took the first step towards reconciliation. "I was wrong too. But I think it's not about Mandy's drawing, but something else." "Interesting. What do you mean?" Nicholas asked. "That you agreed to go on a business trip to another country without my consent." "No, I don't intend to bring up this issue now, but for the future, I'd like you not to make such significant decisions without me," she replied. She approached him, looking into his eyes. "Nicholas, I really want you to respect and consider my interests. I may be just a junior research associate, but I love my work. I'm passionate about conducting research. I want to achieve success in the future. I hear you, and I won't push you. You decide for yourself whether to come with me or stay," Nicholas replied. Lydia leaned on her husband's shoulder and looked into his eyes again. "I can tell you're upset with me." "No," he said. The woman lightened the mood a bit. "Nicholas, I wanted to tell you a funny story yesterday, but I forgot." Nicholas wrinkled his brow. "I think I sort of remember. What did that intern do?" "Acted foolish. I don't know where they're educating such specialists. He doesn't even know the most basic things, but he acts as if he's the smartest person in the world. Our whole lab was wondering how this kid can be so confident. But then, it turned out just the other day that Weston is acting arrogantly because his daddy works at the ministry. No surprise there. It's commonplace. You know what kind of struggle is going on in our organization. They also try to push the sons and daughters of influential people. I'm not against it if they actually have some talent, but usually, we end up with untalented individuals." "Nicholas, was the ministry director's son supposed to take your place?" "Yes, that's why I didn't elaborate. But something must have gone wrong with their chosen candidate, and they decided to fill the gap with me. I was literally told on Friday that I'm going." The man looked guiltily at his wife, but in his eyes, the woman saw sincere regret, and she couldn't help but feel sorry for her husband. "Nicholas, I'll think it over. In a couple of days, I'll tell you my decision, but most likely, it will be a positive one. You're right. For every person, family is still the most valuable thing." Nicholas broke into a smile and drew his wife closer. "Thank you." He checked the time. "Lydia, it's a disaster. I have to be at the ministry with the documents by 8:30. and then I need to rush to the embassy. So, you'll have to take Mandy to daycare. Go on. I still have some time to spare. However, Lydia miscalculated with the time. She had to linger a bit at the daycare. The daycare teacher gathered the parents to talk about an upcoming event. Dear moms and dads, I'll try not to take up too much of your precious time. In a few words, next week, we're having our autumn ball. We kindly ask you to prepare a costume and a short presentation for your child. Keep in mind that everything should match the theme, but simple forms are the best choice. For example, leaves, vegetables, fruits. The kids should easily understand the characters. One responsible dad raised a point with the teacher. Wouldn't it be easier for you to assign roles? Otherwise, everyone might want to be watermelons or apples. It could turn into a monotonous celebration. The daycare teacher took the parents' comment into account and immediately started allocating roles. So, Lydia was late for work. She wanted to sneak into the staff room unnoticed, but she bumped into Weston in the doorway. The young man remarked with a smirk, "You're late today, Lydia." This guy had earned Lydia's enduring antipathy from day one, and she retorted, "And who are you to give me pointers? I know, Lydia, you've been ignoring me. But I don't fall for being ignored and other methods of influence. Although I think you underestimate me." The woman stood her ground. "Explain yourself, Weston. What are you trying to achieve?" The guy grimaced. "Fine, I'll keep it short too. I believe it's wrong that you're not letting me participate in the experiments. It's one thing to observe, but it's an entirely different matter to be actively involved." Lydia decided to temper the intern's enthusiasm. "Young man, you've only been in the lab for a short time. As the group leader, I believe it's too early for you to participate in independent work. I don't want to restrict your rights in any way, but you're still getting accustomed to the working conditions." "Lydia, trust me, I can handle it," Weston insisted. "No, Weston. Until you pass the assessment and excel in safety protocol, I won't allow you to work with complex and potentially dangerous equipment." The young man's eyes flashed with anger, and he disappeared behind the changing room door. Lydia thought that he might be running to complain to the lab manager, and she wasn't wrong. As soon as she took her seat at her desk, the secretary entered the lab. "Lydia, the boss wants to see you urgently." The last thing she wanted was to start the workday with a confrontation. But the boss looked like a boiling teapot. For a moment, she even thought that steam was coming out of his ears. She knocked on the door. "May I come in, Harry?" The boss cast a sideways glance at her. "Don't try to confuse me, Lydia. And, in the current situation, your politeness is inappropriate. I thought good manners were indicative of a person's upbringing." Harry rolled his eyes. "You can't distract me. As the head of the laboratory, I'm telling you that I won't allow you to humiliate other employees. I'm curious, whom did I offend so much?" "Lydia, you know perfectly well who I'm talking about. And the fact that I appointed you as the group leader doesn't give you the right to take it out on others. Even if you don't like someone for some reason, you should treat them with respect." "Harry, if you're referring to Weston, I won't allow him to participate in experiments until he passes the assessment. As for respect and good manners, in decent society, a man should offer his seat to a woman." Harry's face turned red. "We're not at a ball. To me, all employees are equal. I see that arguing with you is futile. Therefore, Lydia, I order you that, from today, Weston will take part directly in the research." "Harry, what if he makes a mistake? Who will be responsible?" "Of course, you'll be responsible for everything that happens within the lab. In that case, I need your written order." "Lydia, don't you think you're pushing it a bit too far? My verbal directive should be sufficient. Now, go and get to work." Harry accurately identified the cause of Weston's arrogance. The young man wasn't used to playing second fiddle, let alone being an extra. He demanded special attention during his college days and insisted on an internship in the laboratory. He had heard from his father that there was an interesting project underway. Weston envisioned himself as a Nobel laureate, but in the lab, he received a rather cold reception. Lydia, in particular, looked down on him. Since he wasn't accustomed to such treatment, he had to press Harry, who was a friend of his father. When Lydia burst into the laboratory, Weston realized that she had been thoroughly briefed on how to deal with him. He approached her without hesitation. "So, are we going to start the experiments right now?" "No, We need to prepare the specimens first. They are in the thermostat. Get all the dishes labeled 17. Do you remember the protocol? Weston nodded. We start with minimum doses with a 30-second exposure time, then gradually increase. I'll monitor the readings myself, and you, Weston, record the results in the log. The young man grinned, and a mischievous thought flashed through his mind. I wonder what Lydia would look like under a microscope with an extra powerful dose. He found this thought quite amusing and got momentarily distracted, failing to hear what Lydia had said from the cabin. He thought it was time to begin the experiment and turned on the machine without checking the setting. A bright flash blinded him, and he yelled in surprise. His hand was still on the switch, and he hurriedly turned it off. Through the glass of the cabin, Lydia looked at him with terror in her eyes. What have you done? I told you to prepare. Didn't you see I wasn't wearing any protective gear? All these questions bombarded the terrified young man. Every part of his body trembled, and he was too afraid to look into the woman's eyes. Weston, what was the reading on the monitor? I need to know this. Do you realize what you've done? Weston understood, but fear had paralyzed his thinking. He lied, saying he had started at the minimum setting. Following the protocol, Lydia reported the emergency to Harry. The boss was distraught. Lydia, I asked you not to do this. You introduced this underachiever to me. I can see that even now, what worries you isn't that because of this minister's son, I received a radiation dose. It's something entirely different. Lydia was about to say more when she suddenly turned pale. Lydia, what's wrong with you? They'll bring you the antidote shortly. Take the pill, and you'll be fine. The boss made Lydia take a strong dose of the antidote. When she began to feel a little better, he pleaded with her. Lydia, let's not tell anyone about this situation. You can take some time off starting tomorrow and relax a bit. Harry, why all these persuasions? You've read the instructions 100 times yourself, and you know I need to seek medical help. Lydia, if you do that, we won't avoid trouble. And, first and foremost, you are to blame for what happened. I asked you to keep an eye on the guy. This isn't a kindergarten. That's right. But don't forget you signed a non-disclosure agreement, and if you go to the hospital, everything will come out. You'll have to answer for it legally too. Lydia, please think about the consequences. If you're feeling unwell, you can go home right now. Lydia did indeed feel unwell. Her head was spinning and her mouth was dry. When she attempted to stand from her chair, nausea rose in her throat. Harry politely offered her his hand. I'll walk you to your car and they'll take you home. You'll call me tomorrow. Agreed. At home, she immediately collapsed into bed and slept until evening. Her daytime sleep resembled more of a feverish dream. She could clearly hear the sounds coming from the street, but they accompanied in realistic images. Little flashes appeared before her eyes, turning into 100 enormous suns. For some reason, her daughters drying with a light of incredible size came to mind. During the laboratory accident, she, too, had thought that the sun had fallen from the sky. Familiar steps echoed in the hallway, and Lydia forced herself to get out of bed by sheer willpower. Her husband was surprised to find her in her bathrobe. Lydia, did you come home early from work, or is something wrong? No, nothing special. I just feel a little unwell. Nicholas, pick up Mandy from daycare. Of course, despite her weakness, Lydia headed to the kitchen to prepare dinner. She tried to calm herself and repeated to herself, everything will be fine. After all, Weston said the dose was minimal, and I took the antidote in time. During dinner, she maintained her composure, trying not to reveal her poor condition. However, her appetite was gone, and she had to force herself to eat. She couldn't wait for the night to come, so Mandy would finally go to sleep. Mommy, sit with me, Mandy said. All right, darling, I'll sit with you. What shall we do together? Lydia asked. We can draw a house and a sun, and I also learned how to draw a dog at kindergarten. Nicholas chuckled. Don't you think our daughter is fixated on the hottest planet? Nicholas, don't forget she's only 3.5 years old, and at this age, all kids draw houses and suns. He looked closely at his wife. Lydia, you really don't look well. I think you should see a doctor. Maybe you caught a cold. Don't worry about me. Everything will be fine tomorrow. But throughout the night, she was nauseous, and in the morning, She found part of her hair on her pillow. Panic struck her. Weston had lied to her, and she had received a larger dose of radiation. To avoid waking her husband, she quietly slipped into the hallway. She dialed her boss's number, counting the long rings. Only after the eighth one, she heard Harry's irritated voice. "Who needs me so early in the morning? You've interrupted my sweetest dreams." "I am sorry for the disturbance, Harry. It's me." "Lydia, what made you get up at 6 in the morning? You've interrupted the sweetest dream." "Forgive me once again, Harry, but I'm displaying all the symptoms of radiation sickness. What should I do?" Something clicked on the other end of the line, and she realized her boss was expressing his displeasure in this way. "Lydia, don't clutter your mind with nonsense. You're an educated person, and you know that it's impossible to receive a critical dose of radiation in the laboratory environment. So calm down and get some rest. I'll send a vehicle with a driver to help you recover quickly." Harry kept his word, and the medicine was delivered to her house the next morning. However, even strong medications didn't help, and by the evening, Lydia couldn't get out of bed. When Nicholas returned from work, he didn't want to listen to her and called an ambulance. But the medical team examined her and found no abnormalities. "Why did you call us? Blood pressure is normal, no fever. Your wife probably has a simple case of asthenia," one of the medics explained. Such a dismissive attitude completely discouraged her husband from seeking medical help. For an entire week, Lydia didn't leave the house. On the eighth day, she unexpectedly felt better and hurried to work. But Harry greeted her unfriendly. "Sit down and write an explanatory statement," he ordered. Lydia froze in amazement. "What do I need to explain?" "You need to explain that it was your fault that there was an accident in the laboratory. Not only did you get radiation exposure yourself, but you also endangered Weston's life. As the leader, I can't turn a blind eye to negligence. Pray that Weston's father doesn't sue you." "All right, I'll write it now." Lydia picked up a piece of paper from her boss's desk. It took her only 2 minutes to write a resignation letter. Harry was taken aback by the suddenness of her action. "Lydia, what is this?" he asked. "It's a letter of resignation, of my own accord. I'm leaving with my husband to another country, and there I'll try to find a job. But you can't just leave like this." "What about our project?" Harry inquired. "You can appoint Weston. He's been eager to prove himself for a while. It will also satisfy the ambitions of his status-seeking father." Harry froze in an awkward pose, his arms outstretched, and his eyes blinked frequently. Lydia even felt a bit sorry for him, but she had no intention of backing down. That evening, when Lydia informed her husband that she had made her final decision, he was relieved. "Lydia, you can't imagine how glad I am that you've supported me. Nicholas, you know, we are the closest people to each other in the world. Remember, in both sorrow and joy, spouses should be together." She laughed brightly, but Nicholas could hear notes of desperation in her laughter. He realized that this decision had not come easily for his wife. She had to give up her beloved job. In the rush of emotions, he embraced his wife and kissed her on the temple. "Thank you, my dear. I can't imagine my life without you and Mandy. Tomorrow, I'll submit your documents for the visa application." The pleasant preparations began, and Lydia's mind was consumed with thoughts of the upcoming journey. However, 2 days before the departure date, her condition suddenly worsened. This time, Nicholas was not as kindly disposed. When he found his wife in bed again, he began to vent his anger. "Lydia, what's happening again? I'm sorry, but I'm getting a bad feeling that you're testing my patience on purpose. Tell me, what else should I prepare for in the remaining 2 days before our flight?" Lydia tried to make amends for her actions, but her attempts were rather feeble. "Nicholas, maybe you should go alone for now. Mandy and I will come later when I feel better." "But that's impossible," he replied. "All right, I'll try to get myself together before the departure. Just please don't shout at me." "What am I supposed to do? Smile? I'm sorry, but all these symptoms of yours seem strange to me. The doctor from the ambulance said you're healthy. Tell it to my face. I'm a malingerer." "Notice that I didn't say that. You said it yourself." Lydia felt so unwell that she had no strength to argue with her husband. In the last days, all she wanted was some rest. She didn't even get upset about his absurd accusations and fell asleep right away. The departure day started with another family quarrel. Nicholas was extremely anxious and checked everything they needed multiple times. On top of his own nervousness, he kept nagging his wife, Lydia, check the documents. Nicholas, I've checked them 5 times already. They are all there. A few minutes passed, and the husband gave another order. I can't remember. Did we bring Mandy's medical card? The woman shrugged helplessly. No, there's only a statement. They told me not to take the card. Nicholas pounced on his wife. Lydia, have you lost your mind lately? We're going to America. They require all vaccinations and a medical history for our daughter. Don't yell at me. The statement has all the information. Lydia wanted to say something else, but she suddenly felt unwell and rushed to the bathroom. Nicholas started berating his wife again. When will this circus end? Lydia, stop making scenes in front of me. I honestly don't understand why you're doing this. The woman returned to the room, and Nicholas was horrified by her appearance. But her helpless condition no longer evoked deep sympathy. Instead, it irritated him even more. Little Mandy also fell silent, watching her parents. She was very afraid that her father would scold her too and tried not to attract any attention to herself to avoid further complicating the situation. Nicholas forbade their grandparents from seeing them off. He told his wife, our parents will only create unnecessary commotion. There will be tears and lamentations, and I don't like that. So, we'll do without noisy farewells. Since their flight was late in the evening, they decided to leave for the airport well in advance. The events of the last few days had shaken the man so much that he missed the turn to the airport and drove about 30 kilometers along a different route. When he realized his mistake, Lydia suddenly began to feel unwell again. Nicholas, please stop the car. I feel nauseous, she said. He braked sharply and, in a fit of anger, dragged her out of the car. Go, but be quick. I knew that we wouldn't make it to the airport without some adventure. His wife didn't return for a long time, so he decided to check on her. Mandy looked at her father with fear and dared not move. Nicholas ordered the little girl, sit here quietly like a mouse, and I'll go find your mother. I'll make sure she's all right. The man headed towards the forest and walked about 300 meters until he stumbled upon an abandoned quarry. He kept calling his wife, but there was no response. The autumn twilight deepened, and it took him a moment to notice a bright spot at the bottom of the quarry. Upon closer examination, he realized that it was his wife. He quietly called out, Lydia, Lydia. His voice echoed multiple times through the treetops and faded somewhere beyond the horizon. Descending into the darkness was dangerous, and there was barely enough time for a rescue operation. The man decisively turned and headed back to the car parked on the road. Trying to encourage himself, he loudly said from a distance, Come on, Mandy, we're going now. Our mommy is sick, so it will be just you and me flying on the plane. Twilight had fully enveloped the surroundings, and he didn't immediately notice that the car door was open and there was no one inside. Nicholas first thought that his daughter had wandered a little way from the parking spot to relieve herself. He made a decent circle around the area, but there was no sign of the little girl. Desperation overwhelmed him, and he began to call out loudly, Mandy, Mandy, where are you, my little one? There was no response to his call. Nicholas knew well that making significant decisions in a state of stress was unwise, but one thought kept hindering him. If you're late for the plane, you might lose your job. After a minute of hesitation, he got into the car and stepped on the gas. In the headlights' glow, the forest and the road took on mystical contours. At that moment, he was inexplicably reminded of an episode from their previous happy life. On their wedding day, when he and Lydia were supposed to sign their names, the palace's marriage officiant delivered a beautiful speech in their honor. Dear Nicholas and Lydia, may this bright day forever remain in your memory. Now, you are husband and wife, which means you must always be together, in both joy and sorrow. The car raced through the autumn night at top speed. Invisible hammers seemed to be pounding in Nicholas's head, repeating, together, in both joy and sorrow. He repeated these words many times in a wild frenzy, and the image of his smiling wife wouldn't leave his imagination. Lydia had also repeated these very words, and it made everything even more terrifying. To rid himself of the nightmarish obsession, he cried out, Lydia, I didn't want this, forgive me, but I can't stay. I couldn't even dream of such a job. I can't miss this one chance. A strong emotional outburst helped him come to his senses. Nicholas arrived at the airport just in time for the end of the check-in, submitting only his own documents. No one asked him any extra questions because everyone was rushing to board. When the airliner ascended into the sky, he felt something snap in his soul. But it didn't scare him. Instead, it filled him with joy. He didn't want to think about his wife and daughter. They were left behind in a completely different life. Victoria was afraid of oversleeping, so she had a rather restless night. However, in the early morning, she fell into a deep slumber and didn't hear her grandmother getting on with her daily chores. The old lady's house wasn't burdened by elements of modern design. The entire living space was a single room, and flowery curtains served as the functional equivalent of doors. This peculiar interior feature had shocked Victoria when her husband brought her to this remote village just 2 days ago. Unable to contain her amazement, she asked the landlady, "Ariel, how can you live in such conditions?" The old woman cheerfully replied, "What's wrong with these conditions? We're not used to excess. Oliver, I'm telling the truth, right?" Oliver, Victoria's husband, was originally from these parts and took great pride in his rural origins. Ariel was his second cousin but had always been affectionately referred to as his second mother. In response to the elderly aunt's question, Oliver confidently replied, "You, Ariel, are a true fortune teller. Whatever you say comes true." Indeed, in earlier times, young girls used to visit her for fortune telling, even those who were getting divorced. But later, she gave up the practice to avoid aggravating the local police officer. He had threatened her, saying, "Ariel, I don't believe in these superstitious things, and I won't let you deceive people." Ariel was afraid to confront the authorities, so she ceased her fortune-telling activities. However, she led an otherwise righteous life. Their village had long been the largest settlement of old believers in the region, but a constant outflow of residents had nearly led to the village's extinction. Oliver's father was also from these parts, but he ran away from his young wife and their 1-year-old son. The woman entrusted the little Oliver to the care of her sister Ariel, and this is how they lived. When the boy turned 14, his mother told him sternly, "My dear son, enroll in the vocational school. If you get an education, you'll be able to replace me. People are always needed on the farm." Indeed, during those challenging times, there was a severe shortage of labor due to the youth's exodus to the city. So, Oliver heeded his mother's advice. In old believer families, the word of the elder was considered law, so the young man couldn't even contemplate going against his mother's wishes. At vocational school, Oliver acquired 2 specialties at once. In addition to learning to operate a tractor, he also mastered the trade of a machinist. But working for the good of the native land only lasted 5 years. The once prosperous farm was slowly dying, and workers went without pay for months. Local men drowned their sorrows in vodka, and Oliver began coming home in an inebriated state quite frequently. His mother knew that with such a lifestyle, her son would quickly spiral into trouble. One day, she asked him to stay for a serious conversation. She said, "I see, my son, that you're struggling, but all this turmoil won't lead to anything good. I don't want your life to go to waste. I've contacted your father. Go to him." This suggestion left the young man in a state of shock. "Mother, are you advising me to ask for help from the man who abandoned us?" he asked in disbelief. The woman calmly explained, "He's your father, and he promised to help." His mother thought for a moment and then added, "You can't judge people, my son. Everyone can make mistakes, but you must be merciful and know how to forgive. Then someday you will be forgiven too." Oliver remembered these words for the rest of his life. They became a sort of maternal commandment for him. He went to a distant city where his father worked at a metallurgical plant, holding the position of a workshop manager. His father had a family with 2 children. Although his new stepmother accepted Oliver as her own, he kept his distance. Following his father's advice, Oliver enrolled in a specialized institute and graduated with honors. Thanks to his father's connections, he later transferred to a job in another city. In this city, Oliver met Victoria. Despite a significant age difference of 13 years, the young couple quickly found common ground. They understood each other with half a word, and conflicts between them were rare. Victoria's father, Oscar, held a high position in the regional authorities, and he considered it a matter of honor to help his daughter's husband. With his father-in-law's assistance, Oliver climbed the career ladder. When uncertain times arrived, family members quickly transitioned from government service to private business. This crisis-driven change was very successful, so Oliver considered his life a success. He often told his wife, "I've been incredibly lucky because two guardian angels have watched over my life, my mother and your father. Without these people, I might still be drinking vodka with the guys and cursing my fate." Victoria was also content with her life, except for one thing: the Lord hadn't blessed them with a child. They visited numerous clinics, spent a lot of money, but remained childless. Even Israeli doctors and Indian yogis couldn't help. Desperation eventually turned into acceptance. When Oliver found another unique method, his wife calmly responded, "No, Oliver, that's enough. I don't want to test fate anymore. If God hasn't given us children, then we must have a different purpose on this earth. You've said it yourself. Nothing in life happens without reason, and I believe in that." Victoria devoted herself to caring for other people's children. At her initiative, a charitable foundation was established, initially operating on a non-profit basis. Helping children who found themselves in difficult life situations through no fault of their own brought immense satisfaction to Victoria. She often involved her father and husband in this work, and the men were generous when it came to charity. Even during vacations, Victoria didn't forget her important mission. She always transferred a small sum to the account of some shelter in her current location. Most often, the couple spent their vacations in tropical destinations where it was very warm but where there were many poor people. But this year, before their upcoming vacation, Oliver asked his wife, "Victoria, don't you want to change something in our lives?" The woman looked at her husband with interest. She knew he wouldn't ask such serious questions about their vacation without a good reason. However, her response was somewhat indifferent. "What's with the silly questions? You know I adore changes. If my intuition isn't failing me, you want to suggest something new for our vacation, right?" The man was pleased. "To be honest, I've grown tired of the unbearable heat and traveling to foreign countries. I think it's time for us to explore our native lands. What do you think?" he asked his wife. "In principle, I don't mind, as long as you propose an interesting vacation," she replied. "I promise you won't get bored," he assured her. "Why not? Years ago, about 10 years ago, my father and I visited a village. His uncle lived there, a very strict man. It was a fantastic experience, and I still remember the taste of ripe cherries in my mouth. His uncle had a whole cherry orchard with not a single identical tree. He did some grafting to create new varieties." Oliver listened to his wife and could even taste the fruit in his mouth. "I wish I had visited those parts long ago, but I'm sure you'll have a lot of pleasant experiences during our trip to my homeland," he said. Victoria gazed at her husband, and there was already a spark of excitement in her eyes. "Oliver, you described it all so fascinatingly. I can't wait. Take me to your village to visit Ontario." Oliver was delighted. He had initiated the conversation on a delicate topic and hadn't expected to convince her so quickly. But what really led him to change their traditional vacation route was his desire to go hunting. Although Oliver wasn't a fan of this hobby, he couldn't refuse George. George was a well-known name in local business circles, and a friendship with him could be highly beneficial to their business. George had called Oliver a couple of weeks ago. "Oliver, how do you feel about hunting?" he inquired. Sensing no hidden agenda in the question, Oliver replied, "I'm generally in favor of it, as long as we replace the rifle with a camera." Laughter came from the other end of the line. "You're quite the joker. Honestly, I prefer the actual process too." They chatted about various topics for a while before George returned to the subject of hunting. "You know, I was lucky enough to buy a plot of land, and I decided to continue the glorious traditions. I've already built a house with guest rooms." For Oliver, getting acquainted with George could also bring tremendous future benefits. Therefore, he assured the new estate owner that he'd pay a visit before the hunting season started. "George, I was born in those parts myself, and I'm planning to visit Ontario." When George learned that Oliver was well acquainted with the area for the upcoming hunt, he shouted in delight, and Oliver had to pull the phone away from his ear. He didn't tell his wife the details of his conversation with George. just suggesting they spend their vacation in his rural hometown. Unaware of her husband's true plans, Victoria was preparing to go mushroom picking with Ontario. The elderly woman had already arranged all the gear and containers in advance and warned her, "I'll wake you up early, around 5 o'clock. These are the best mushroom spots, but it's quite a few kilometers away, maybe even more." The guest was very curious about why they needed to go to the forest so early, but Ariel made it clear that she didn't like unnecessary questions. Since her husband's aunt wasn't in the mood for conversation, Victoria wanted to ask Oliver about everything. It turned out that he was also busy with some preparations. She asked, "Oliver, what's your reason for this?" "We're going mushroom picking, after all." Oliver realized he had gotten himself into a tricky situation and began to explain, "Victoria, there's a bit of a situation. I was surprised myself. It turns out that George has moved nearby. You must know him. He's one of the wealthiest people around, and you just happened to meet him, right?" Victoria summed up the situation with a teacher's tone. "Yes, I didn't expect it at all. George invited me to go hunting out of pure curiosity," Oliver replied, even though he felt his facial expression might look idiotic. Victoria quickly put the facts together in her mind and spoke with a teacherly tone. "So, in order to get closer to George, you brought me to this remote place." Oliver tried to make amends, saying, "Victoria, I won't do it again. If you want, we can leave for the Maldives or any other place tomorrow. Just don't be upset." "No way, dear. Now I'll go mushroom hunting every day, and you'll be the one enjoying the forest's gifts." To avoid further upsetting his wife, Oliver decided to sleep on the veranda that night and left for George's estate well before dawn. Therefore, in the morning, Victoria couldn't express all the things she thought about him. While she contemplated matters, Ariel set the table. Victoria ate her breakfast with gusto. The elderly woman ate slowly and kept a watchful eye on Victoria. She only asked once, "Is it delicious?" "It's amazing," Victoria replied. "Enjoy your meal, because we don't know when we'll be back. I brought some food for a snack, but we'll probably get hungry during the day," Ariel explained. Ariel led the way, and Victoria followed closely behind. She marveled at where this elderly lady got all her energy. They had been walking for about 2 hours without taking a break. Victoria really wanted to ask her guide for a short rest, but she felt embarrassed. Ariel seemed to sense that the city girl, unaccustomed to forest hikes, was tired. "If you want to take a break, let's have a stop. We should have some water," Ariel suggested. "I'm thirsty too, but first, I need to use the bathroom," Victoria responded. Ariel nodded understandingly. Victoria walked about 20 meters away from the parking spot and suddenly heard sounds resembling sobbing. She felt frightened, but her curiosity got the better of her, and she followed the strange sound. In the next moment, Victoria experienced a real shock. Right under a bush, on the damp ground, sat a little girl crying. When she saw the child, Victoria wanted to scream, but only a hoarse noise came out. Victoria rushed to the child. "Don't be afraid, I won't hurt you," she assured the little girl. She took a few more steps towards the child, but the girl burst into tears again, trying to say something but only wheezing. Victoria decided to help. "Did you lose your mom?" she asked. The girl, wiping tears from her face, nodded in agreement. "Where is she? Did you come here together, or was someone else with you?" The little girl started wailing, and her crying turned into spasms. Victoria was concerned for the child's health. She took off her jacket and wrapped the child in it. The girl didn't resist, and Victoria lifted her up. "You'll warm up now. Have you been in the forest for a long time? You must be very hungry." There were no answers to these simple questions. However, Ariel arrived at the scene. At first, she couldn't understand why her nephew's wife was pressing the child to her chest. She rushed towards them, reproaching, "Where were you? I was getting worried. What are you hiding under your coat?" Victoria slightly opened the edge of her jacket, and Ariel gasped, saying, "A child. Yes, a very frightened one. She's a girl, about 3 or 4 years old, and she can't speak. Probably her voice gave out from crying," Victoria explained. Ariel delved into her bag. "Here, dear, take this to eat." The girl eagerly grabbed a piece of bread and started eating it in big bites. Ariel fussed around the little find. "Don't rush. You might choke." I also have an apple. Eat, my dear. Take your time. The elderly woman gave Victoria a stern look and said, "Why are you standing there like a statue? We need to find her mother. A little child can't wander in the woods without supervision." "You are right, Ariel. I'll take a look nearby. Just don't go too far, or you might get lost." Victoria spent about 3 hours searching the woods. She tried not to wander far from where she found the child. She checked under every bush but found nothing except a pink backpack containing a drawing album, markers, and 2 small dolls. When the little girl saw this discovery in Victoria's hands, she smiled. "This is mine." Although the child's voice was still raspy, her words were clearer this time. Victoria crouched down next to the girl. "What's your name?" The little girl didn't respond. The two women exchanged glances. After a brief pause, Ariel suggested, "Maybe your name is Mary." Victoria thought the girl nodded. "Perhaps you guessed it, Ariel. But it doesn't make our task any easier. What should we do with the child? We've been here for 5 hours, and her mother is nowhere in sight." The elderly woman gasped and covered her mouth with her hand so the little girl wouldn't hear. She whispered quickly, "Victoria, listen. What if the girl's mother intentionally brought her to the woods to get rid of her? We didn't even consider that. Yes, that's a possibility we didn't think of. But look, the girl is wearing nice, expensive clothes, which means her family lived comfortably." That's true. The women were deep in thought, pondering what to do with the girl. After her hunger was satisfied, she fell asleep in her savior's arms. "What are we thinking here? We should take her to the police." "Let them handle it," Ariel suggested. Victoria felt the warmth of the child's breath, and an inner voice whispered to her, "This is a heavenly gift to you. The Lord had mercy on you and gave you this child. Don't hand her over to strangers." She held the child even closer. "But, Ariel, in that case, they'll send her to an orphanage, won't they?" "Of course, the state will take care of her if no relatives are found." Enough contemplating. Let's go home before it gets dark. During the entire journey back, Victoria carried the little girl in her arms. Although the child was quite well fed, Victoria didn't feel as tired as she did that morning. She caught herself thinking that she didn't want to let go of this child. She felt a connection with her from the very first moment. It was the kind of connection every mother feels, and even great distances can't affect it. After 2 days, they were all a little tired but satisfied with the hunting trip that George had organized on his own initiative. The estate owner himself exuded joy as he bid his esteemed guests farewell. It was already quite dark when Oliver left George's estate. He reached home without knowing what awaited him there. When he saw his wife holding a sleeping little girl, he was nearly knocked off his feet. "Victoria, who is this?" Ariel spoke on her behalf. "We don't know either. We went mushroom picking, and we found this little girl." The elderly woman gave her nephew and his wife an expressive look. George also had no idea that this pleasant evening would bring an unexpected gift. After the guests had left, he ordered the guard to check all approaches to the estate and set the property on high alert. The young man rushed to carry out the order but quickly returned. The guard appeared frightened, with his eyes on the verge of popping out of their sockets. "George, there's a woman out there, a very scary one." "What are you talking about?" "What woman?" The guard began to stutter from anxiety. "I don't know. She looks like a ghost." "How can you be a security guard if you're trembling like this? Get out of here, and quickly. The woman must be a figment of your imagination. There are no women here, and there can't be." Indeed, the entire staff in the house consisted solely of men. The only woman in the estate was Jane, the mother of the owner. She managed the entire household and handled the finances. George trusted his mother completely. Although he was well into his 30s, he had no immediate plans to start a family. He enjoyed the company of women but was afraid of commitment. His mother was a faithful companion and a reliable friend to George. So when the guard informed him of the presence of an unknown woman on the premises, he immediately ran into the house. "Mom, it seems we have an emergency," Jane asked. "What's the nature of this emergency?" The guard noticed an unknown woman on the property. "Should I go check it out?" "Stay in the house. You have a whole security team for a reason. Let them earn their pay." George called another guard and instructed him to search the entire area. Jane watched her son from a distance and couldn't understand why he had grown up to be such a coward. After all, his father had spent his entire life fighting crime and died in the line of duty. "Oh, who is this?" The guard escorted the woman in a light-colored coat to the house. The stranger was struggling to move her legs, so the young man had to practically drag her while holding her by the waist. The woman's face and legs were covered in blood, and her upper clothing was caked with dirt. Jane exclaimed in horror, "Dear Lord, what's happened to her? She's probably drunk, isn't she?" The guard shrugged. "It doesn't seem like it, and I don't smell any alcohol. She's mumbling something incoherent, impossible to make out." As soon as the bodyguard released his grip, his living burden collapsed onto the marble steps. Jane cried out in terror, "George, she might have a fractured skull. Check what's happening with her head. There's blood. I'm afraid to approach her." "Mom, don't panic, and nobody is forcing you to approach this woman. I'll check her head myself." With the help of the guard, George carried the woman into the house. Her bones are intact, but it's clear she fell from a height, which caused significant damage to her soft tissues. "It's not unlikely that she has a serious concussion," George observed. Jane watched her son's actions with wide-open eyes, and her inner thoughts told her, "No, Jane, you're wrong. Your son is not a coward at all. Look at how skillfully he's handling everything, unafraid of the blood." But the woman is used to keeping her thoughts to herself. She only dared to ask aloud, "George, what are we going to do with her?" "Mom, you ask strange questions. We can't just throw a helpless person out on the street. Let the young lady regain her composure, and we'll see from there." George gently lifted the woman and carried her deeper into the house, with Jane following. "Son, why are you bringing her into the house? What if she's ill or a criminal being sought by the police?" The man smiled. "Mom, in any case, she's a human being. Go through your contact book. Maybe you have a doctor or nurse acquaintance. We need to get them here, right now. Of course, can't you see that her condition is serious? In such cases, hours, sometimes minutes, can make all the difference." Jane rushed to fulfill the task. "I'll call an acquaintance. It's the middle of the night, and he might tell me to go to hell, but I'll ask him to come." Her mother's acquaintance didn't refuse because, in his distant youth, he had sworn the Hippocratic oath. Even in his well-deserved retirement, he honored his medical duty. During the examination of the patient, the elderly doctor constantly sighed. "She's lucky that there are no major fractures. I'm concerned about her right arm, and her head has taken a significant blow. These injuries are characteristic of a fall from a height. The most dangerous part is the potential for brain swelling. I'd advise you to send the young lady to a hospital." Jane exclaimed, "What are you talking about? There are no hospitals in these parts, especially not at night. I think there isn't even a clinic here. I recently wanted to check my blood pressure and left my blood pressure monitor in the city. I went to the clinic, and there's a massive padlock on the door." The old medic cast his eyes downward. "Yes, unfortunately, our healthcare system is not in the best condition today. I'd recommend strict bed rest and rest for her. I'll treat her wound now, and tomorrow, closer to noon, I'll check in on her." George scrutinized the injured woman's face. "I wonder how she ended up here. She appears to be an educated woman," he remarked. Jane nodded in agreement. "Yes, and she's wearing expensive clothes. George, if this woman were a victim of an attack, they would have taken her jewelry. But her earrings are still there, and she has an expensive pendant around her neck." The elderly woman carefully pulled a golden box adorned with small gemstones from the woman's pocket. As soon as she touched the miniature casket, it sprang open. "George, take a look here. There's a hidden photograph inside. It's a little girl with a huge bow." The businessman examined the blurry photo, as if it had been submerged in water. Unexpectedly, Jane spoke to her son. "You should go to sleep, and I'll stay here and keep watch. Maybe she'll regain her senses and tell us about herself. Then it will be easier to find her relatives." The injured woman had tossed and muttered incoherently throughout the night. In the morning, she opened her eyes and stared at Jane. "Who are you?" "I'm your guardian angel. Our security guard found you last night. Do you remember what happened to you?" The woman grimaced. "No, I don't remember anything. I only recall falling." Jane cautiously asked the second question. "What's your name? What's your address?" The stranger furrowed her brow, which was covered in numerous scrapes, wincing in pain. Lydia. My name is Lydia. And your last name? The compassionate caregiver inquired. Don't you remember? No. There's just emptiness in my mind. My whole body hurts. The strain had drained the girl's energy, and she closed her eyes. Jane covered her with a blanket. Rest. You'll remember everything later. It happens after a severe shock. First, memory vanishes, and then it returns. Regain your strength. You're safe here. Thank you, Lydia replied. Lydia closed her eyes and descended into a dark void, reminiscent of a long tunnel. In this narrow corridor, bright sparks appeared on the walls every second, which then transformed into faces. These faces contorted, attempting to say something to her, but she couldn't understand a word. Within the corridors of the special agency, there was an echoing emptiness. The scale of the ancient building was so immense that the rare visitors looked like tiny insects to her. This environment left a strong impression on the little girl. She looked at Oliver with wide eyes and held tightly onto his hand. Concerned, Oliver asked, "Are you scared?" The little girl mumbled, "It's very scary here." "When are we going home?" Oliver couldn't take his eyes off the door marked 315. He replied, "We'll go soon, just waiting for Mom." As if in confirmation of his words, the massive doors swung open slightly. Victoria emerged from there. Oliver had never seen his wife so joyful. She radiated happiness, as if her light filled the vast space. She clutched a folder of documents to her chest and exclaimed, "It's all over, my dear ones. The worries and troubles are behind us. We are now one happy family, and you, sweetheart, are our legal daughter." Victoria squatted down beside the chair where the little girl sat huddled in a ball. The child didn't understand the cause of the adult's joy but simply shifted her gaze from one to another. Remaining in the same uncomfortable position, Victoria took the child's hand and began to explain. "Now you are our daughter. I'm your mom, and this is your dad." Oliver nodded, and Victoria asked the child, "Mary, are you happy?" The girl energetically nodded her head, and then suddenly asked, "Where's Mandy?" The adults were momentarily confused. Victoria thought that the child meant a toy. "You'll have many dolls, and you can name them whatever you want. We'll go to the toy store right now, and you can pick a friend you like." The child agreed. "Can I name her Mandy? I had a Mandy before, and my dad was different. Then he left, and he took my Mandy with him." The new parents exchanged puzzled looks again. In a hushed voice, Victoria said to her husband, "She keeps repeating that." Oliver tried to reassure his wife. With small children, this often happens after experiencing stress. It might be fragments of memories, but I think it's just a product of a child's imagination. Time heals all wounds. We just need to wait. Victoria sighed. "I'm willing to wait for this little one for an eternity." The man didn't say anything, but the struggle within him continued. It had been ongoing ever since he first saw the child in Aunt Ariel's house. The story told by the women seemed like a movie plot, and he was reluctant to believe it. Oliver was a law-abiding citizen and supported his aunt's intention to report the find to the police. However, his wife opposed this decision. "Oliver, you understand perfectly well that the police won't be able to do anything here. What do you suggest? Then, we should take the girl with us, and as soon as we get back, report the find." Oliver found his wife's suggestion more rational. Nevertheless, they informed the local police about the child found in the woods. The police officer was taken aback. "I can't do anything on my own. The girl will be sent to a social shelter in the nearest city anyway. You can file a report, but imagine the headache it will cause me." They stayed at Aunt Ariel's for 2 more days and then headed home. The little girl behaved calmly throughout the journey. Based on some of her behaviors, the couple guessed that she was accustomed to car trips. The child responded to the name Mary but constantly recalled Mandy. Although she could speak, her utterances were mostly short sentences that made little sense to the couple. When Oscar learned about the discovery, he was shocked. "Do you guys realize what kind of trouble you might be getting into? What if this girl has parents, and she just got lost? You could be accused. Do you know what kind of sentence you're facing?" Understanding that her father was quite upset, Victoria interjected, "Dad, I know the laws. We don't plan to hide that we found a child. We just wanted to consult with you on where to turn in such cases." This confession somewhat reassured her father. "In that case, it's a different matter. You should write a report to initiate a search for the child's parents. Dad, then they'll take the girl away. Well, yes. Such a procedure is provided by the law. Victoria looked pleadingly at her father. Daddy, please. Imagine what awaits a little child in a social shelter. Victoria, what are you driving your father into? Oscar seemed to want to express his outrage, but did it weakly. Victoria had learned to manipulate her father from an early age, and now she was deploying her most powerful tool, the desire of her beloved daughter. Of course, I can try to do something, but I can't promise. On the way home after their conversation with her father, Victoria admitted, I might be cruel, but I don't want the girl's real parents to be found. Oliver looked at his wife. You're just obsessed with the idea of keeping the child. But the girl is not a toy. She's a little person. Just for a moment, put yourself in her mother's or father's shoes. Imagine how they must be feeling right now. Victoria felt ashamed of her desires and no longer expressed them so openly. The search for Mary lasted for 6 months across the entire region, but it yielded no positive results. During this time, the little girl they found in the woods lived with them, experiencing no denials. The couple hired a nanny for the child, who played with her and read her fairy tales all day. Oscar eagerly awaited the outcome of this story. He had grown attached to the little girl and secretly wished for her to stay in the family. When he was informed that nobody had reported a missing child with her description, and it was likely that the child's parents were not interested in her fate, he immediately called his daughter. Victoria, you can start the adoption paperwork. All the deadlines have passed, and Mary's parents still hadn't shown up. For some time, Victoria still feared that her suddenly acquired happiness would come to an end. She flinched at every phone call or doorbell ring. However, months and years went by, and nobody disrupted their family peace. Their adopted daughter was growing into a smart girl, delighting her parents with her achievements. Since children's memories are selective, Mary hardly remembered anything from her past. Only occasionally, in her dreams, a beautiful woman would visit her, gently stroking her head. Over time, this woman appeared less and less frequently. Nicholas' job had taken a toll on his health. At his wife's insistence, he regularly visited a very well-known doctor and diligently followed all of his recommendations. However, the systematic treatment didn't help, and breathlessness became a constant companion in his life. He tried to hide his bouts of discomfort from his wife, but Diana was well aware of his tricks. Nicholas, you're needlessly trying to put one over on me. I see everything. If you don't think about yourself, at least think about me and our children. Darling, I think about all of you. For someone my age, minor health issues are just part of the norm. I've always been amazed by your negligence toward your own health. Diana, your health is in the best interest of our family. If something happens to you, how will we live? Have you considered that your illness could adversely affect our children's future? After all, Carl and Ashley want to attend Cambridge. They believe it's the only place to get a proper education. Diana had always surprised Nicholas with her cynicism, but she had never taken it to such extremes before. So, Diana, are you now openly declaring that I'm essentially a means for ensuring your comfortable existence? Did I understand you correctly? The woman raised her eyebrows in surprise once again. Yes, that's right. What are you so surprised about? Your peculiar way of caring for me. I thought you loved me. Of course, I love you. Your love is strange. Well, let's not argue about this. I'll go see Dr. Krantz tomorrow. No need to visit him. I've already talked to the doctor, and he recommended some rest in the Alps. There are plenty of excellent and not very expensive resorts there. We can all go as a family. All right, dear. We'll do as you said. Nicholas wanted to end this unpleasant conversation as soon as possible. He headed to his office. Diana, please have dinner without me. I need to get some work done. The wife just looked at him with dissatisfaction, and he distinctly heard her mutter. Nicholas quickly adapted to life in America. Initially, he was haunted by memories of the past, but he pushed them aside vigorously. His work helped with that. He immediately threw himself into his job and soon became an example for his colleagues. This led to several promotions. He kept a strict schedule for calling his parents, about once a month. The most challenging part was hiding the fate of Lydia and Mandy from them. For about a year, he managed to come up with excuses, desperately lying that his wife and daughter were visiting a close friend or vacationing on the Mediterranean coast. On behalf of his family, he conveyed greetings to the grandparents and artfully fabricated stories about Mandy's achievements. However, there are limits to how much one can lie, and it's impossible to lie indefinitely. Nicholas understood that a moment would come when he'd have to reveal the whole truth. He had already devised a plan to navigate this complex situation. One day, he called his parents himself, with a tragic tone in his voice, and informed them that unknown people had taken his wife and daughter. He genuinely grieved, and his parents believed him. He even began to believe his own lie and had the audacity to report the disappearance of family members to the embassy. Nicholas said that his wife and daughter arrived later. No one bothered to verify this information. It's not difficult to imagine that the search efforts led to no results, and without much effort, Nicholas officially acquired the status of a bachelor. He had a residence permit in the host country, and he was already contemplating settling there permanently. This was aided by a charming brunette named Diana. The young woman was proficient in the language and worked as a translator in their department. When Nicholas began to court her, she asked, "If you just want to have some fun, you're wasting your time. I don't settle for trifles." Her bluntness surprised the man, and he confidently lied again, saying, "Diana, I have the most serious intentions. You can't imagine how lonely a single man feels in a foreign country." Diana was well aware of Nicholas' family tragedy and expressed her sympathy. She said, "Yes, losing loved ones is incredibly hard. When my mother passed away, I couldn't see colors anymore. The whole world seemed gray, and I thought I couldn't go on." Nicholas shared his own feelings with her in a somber tone. "You know, Diana, when I close my eyes, I see the faces of my beloved daughters. I miss them so much. If I ever came across those who dared to take them away from me, I would send them to the other side with my own hands." Although this confession frightened the young woman, she said, "I understand you. Please don't consider me tactless, but I want to help you forget your sorrow." Nicholas initially didn't understand what the translator meant by help. It was only after a passionate night with her that he grasped the meaning of her words. He had no intentions of entering a new marriage, but Diana began to press him, and she did it quite charmingly. "Nicholas, if they find out that you've been bothering me, you could get into trouble. They might even send you back, and you'll lose such a good job," she warned. He first thought she was joking. "Diana, everything between us was mutual," he replied. She gave him a sly look. "Who knows that? I could say you got what you wanted by force." "I don't understand what you're aiming for," he asked. "Marry me," Diana said, still looking him directly in the eyes, and he couldn't decide whether to laugh or cry. The situation was complicated because if he complied with the translator's threat, he could not only be deported from the country where he dreamed of settling, but also face a real prison sentence. He weighed the pros and cons in just a few seconds and put on a strange smile for the young woman. "I've wanted to propose to you for a while. You beat me to it. You're quite indecisive." "Although I find this trait very endearing," she remarked. Diana immediately perked up. The newlyweds set off on their journey the same day. Nicholas had longed to return to his homeland, but his new wife was vehemently against it. "Nicholas, don't mock me. I don't want to visit your parents. I find it uninteresting. If you're so keen on introducing me to them, let them come to us," she stated. But Nicholas' mother and father were reluctant to entertain that idea. They disapproved of their son's hasty marriage. His father even scolded him over the phone once. "You've forgotten us quickly. That we could forgive. But Nicholas, you've forgotten your wife and daughter, whom you loved so much. I didn't expect your memory to be this short," his father reproached him. Disheartened, Nicholas tried to wrap up the unpleasant conversation with his father as quickly as possible. After that, he called his relatives even less frequently. He never even mentioned Lydia's parents. He feared their questioning, but he was never plagued by guilt. After the birth of their sons, he actively tried to forget his previous life. On the contrary, he was even grateful for the twists his destiny had taken. He brought his contemplation about life to a close. "Yes, my health took a bit of a hit, but no problem. We'll fix it." Diana came up with a great idea. A vacation in the Alps is like a fairy tale. It's no accident that many famous figures used to go there for treatment. The only downside to this option is that I'm not very good at skiing. Unconsciously, he opened the top drawer of his desk and began sifting through some documents for no apparent reason. Beneath a pile of papers, there was a yellowed envelope. With trembling hands, he opened it and retrieved a photograph. This picture was taken by one of Nicholas' colleagues on the memorable autumn day when they went for a picnic. In the photo, his wife and daughter were looking at the camera, happily smiling. Mandy was wearing a cute bunny costume and a stylish little jacket. He remembered that his wife had been against putting their daughter in new clothes. Outside the door, Diana's persistent footsteps could be heard. "Nicholas, are you okay?" she asked. He quickly hid the envelope and closed the drawer. "Yes, everything's fine. I'll work a little longer." "Okay, I understand. But don't forget, in half an hour, you need to take your medicine." "I won't forget, my dear." In an attempt to distract himself from the gloomy thoughts that had surfaced upon seeing the old photograph, the man started going through the documents in a folder on the table. Nicholas had a long-established habit of leaving the most important papers out on the table. Nicholas had heard a lot about vacationing in the Alps, but he had never been to this beautiful place himself. The picturesque landscapes left him awestruck, and during the initial days, he carried his camera everywhere, snapping pictures of everything in contrast to his wife, who glided gracefully on skis. He wasn't particularly fond of this type of physical activity. Diana had introduced their sons to skiing, and they would head out early each morning for the slopes. After 3 days at the resort, Diana asked her husband, "Nicholas, why did you come here?" "To breathe fresh air, that's what I'm doing," he replied. "Aren't you ashamed in front of the kids?" she quizzed. "Why should I be embarrassed?" Nicholas responded, "Because you're a coward. The boys are waiting for you to join them and have an amazing downhill experience. Trust me, the adrenaline rush will keep you charged for months." Diana's persuasion eventually led Nicholas to agree to descend from the highest point in the area they were vacationing. The boys were delighted, and Carl, the older son, took it upon himself to prepare his father. "You need an instructor?" "Dad, I'll show you everything." The morning was sunny, lifting their spirits. On the chairlift, they ascended to the mountain's peak, a name that Nicholas had yet to commit to memory. Despite the early hour, there were quite a few people around, but most were eager sports enthusiasts. Nicholas glanced at his belly and sighed heavily, but it was too late to back down. He followed his sons to the starting point. Following Carl's insistence, he went second, with Ashley, the younger one, taking the rear. Within the first few seconds of their descent, he felt a rush of icy air scorch his airways, causing him to cough. This proved to be a fatal mistake because his skis veered off the track and carried him downhill uncontrollably. He instinctively reached for bushes and trees as they whizzed past, but the speed's momentum was too great to halt. The last thing he remembered was somersaulting head over heels. Then he blacked out, having no desire to rejoin the world due to the impending body aches. Nicholas had been in Dr. Krantz's clinic for several months. During his ill-fated downhill skiing accident, he suffered a spinal injury and multiple limb fractures. The only way to escape excruciating pain was through sleep. When Dr. Krantz appeared at the door of his ward, Nicholas pleaded, "Tell the nurse to give me another injection. I can't bear this pain." The doctor looked at him disapprovingly and replied, "Nicholas, we can't administer strong pain medication so frequently." Nicholas asked, "Why not?" "Firstly, it could lead to addiction. Secondly, these medications are expensive." "What does it matter? Tell me how much it costs, and my wife will cover my treatment." Krantz looked at the patient again, but now there was pity in his gaze rather than judgment. "Yesterday, your wife asked for a reduction in your treatment course and the removal of costly medications. That can't be right. I purposely put all my bills in her name for her to pay for my treatment. I told you what I know. The rest you can sort out with your wife. I haven't adjusted the treatment plan yet. Maybe you have additional sources of financing and you can pay for your own treatment." "No, I don't have such sources. But please, don't make any changes yet. My wife will come and we'll sort everything out. I think you simply misunderstood her. We had an agreement." Struggling, Nicholas reached for the nightstand where his mobile phone lay. He dialed Diana's number, but she didn't answer. "Dr. Krantz waited a little longer and then left the room. Diana only showed up the next day, and Nicholas immediately confronted her. Where have you been? And why did you change the treatment plan without consulting me? Nicholas, don't start throwing tantrums. We can't spend such enormous sums on your treatment. Remember, you have 2 sons, and they need a good education. Nicholas was breathless with outrage. And what about me? Diana smiled affectionately, but there was something sinister in that smile. We've taken care of you. There's a nursing home near the city for people with similar problems. The cost of care there is reasonable. We'll visit you occasionally with the boys. Nicholas yelled, I don't want to go to your nursing home. Nicholas, calm down. You have no other option. With the same smile on her face, Diana waved goodbye to Nicholas. He understood all too well that he had no other option. Moreover, he had no money because, out of foolishness, he had entrusted all finances to his wife. Desperation overwhelmed his entire being, and he dialed his father's number. There was no answer for a while, and then an unfamiliar voice asked, Who are you looking for? Get Jack. I'm his son, Nicholas replied. The voice on the other end shouted loudly, then the same voice said, Jack isn't here. He passed away 6 months ago. Nicholas was silent for a moment, shocked by this news. Then, with a trembling voice, he asked, And where is Mom? I'm not sure, but they said her elder son took her. I'm a neighbor. Perhaps you remember me. I came to water the flowers, and then the phone rang. For the first time in his life, Nicholas cried. He no longer paid attention to the physical pain because the emotional pain overcame it. What have I done? Now, I'm not needed by anyone, not by anyone. His cries brought nurse running, who administered a calming injection. Nicholas fell asleep once more. During his recovery, his farts returned to normal, and he said aloud, hoping to lift his spirits, No, there is still a way out. I'll go back home. I have an apartment there. I'll manage somehow. He called the embassy for assistance. In less than 2 weeks, Nicholas was back home. Although he couldn't move without crutches, this didn't deter him from making bold plans for the future. In George's estate, there was a genuine commotion, but Jane was the busiest of them all. Despite her imposing size and respectable age, she gracefully navigated the stairs, and her heightened physical activity elicited smiles. Lydia, her son's wife, tried not to interfere with her mother-in-law. Jane, can I help you with something? Lydia inquired. Can you believe this? The entire house is on me. If it weren't for me, they'd all be buried in dirt by now. Where's the first aid kit? The daughter-in-law directed the panting mother-in-law. The first aid kit is where it always is, in the kitchen. But why do you need it? Are you feeling unwell? No, Lydia, I'm feeling fine, but I need to calm down. Otherwise, my blood pressure will spike again. Lydia headed to retrieve the first aid kit, but ran into her husband along the way. George, please, calm your mother down. I don't understand why she's so worked up. However, George didn't get a chance to answer this question because the source of the commotion, his mother, was already speaking up. How can I be calm when you're leaving me alone in this estate? George chuckled. Mom, I hardly recognize you. We go on trips almost every month, but there's never been such a fuss. That's right, there hasn't been, because there hadn't been such occasions. Jane looked imploringly at her son. George, I'm not comfortable with your idea of this anniversary celebration. I have a bad feeling about it. Mom, for heaven's sake, let go of these superstitions. We have a strong partnership. I can tell you one thing. Let them envy us. By the way, envy can be a good motivator for growth. The elderly woman was indignant. I'm amazed by your recklessness. Lydia, could you please influence him? Even though you're trying to hide it from me, I know about those calls. That's why I'm worried about you. There have been so many cases where they use various methods to eliminate competitors. Accidents are staged, and more. You should have at least left the child behind. Let Mandy stay with me. Lydia embraced her mother-in-law. Jane, please, calm down. I assure you everything will be fine, and we'll be back in a week. As for Mandy, she volunteered herself. We didn't pressure her. If you can persuade her, let her stay, and it will put our minds at ease. The elderly woman was moved. Her daughter-in-law and son hadn't showered her with much attention, so she didn't want to miss this chance to assess their feelings towards her. She especially appreciated her daughter-in-law's care. 15 years ago, she had taken care of Lydia, helped her come back to life, and had essentially replaced her own mother. It's just a pity that Lydia's memory hadn't fully returned. George had taken her to various doctors, but they advised him to be content with the results they had. So, they all celebrated together. And life had drastically improved for the better after Mandy came into their lives. Thinking of her granddaughter, the elderly woman resolutely headed to her room. She entered without knocking and declared, "Mandy, I'll be very sad if you leave." "What's there that you've forgotten?" The young girl looked at her grandmother with surprise. "Granny, don't you understand that I have friends there? I promised them I'd come, and we'd meet. Aren't I a friend?" The girl hung onto her grandmother. "You're the best friend, but I'll tell you a secret. I'm going for a very serious matter." Intrigued, the woman stared at her granddaughter. "Mandy, don't stress out your grandma. Tell me, what are you planning?" "I can't say yet. If I tell you, you might mess everything up." "What kind of matter is this that I could mess up?" The girl glanced at the door. "I can only tell you that it concerns my mom," Jane stated meaningfully. You probably still want to unravel the mystery of her past life." Mandy was disappointed. "So you know everything and aren't telling me?" "I don't really know everything. I tried to help her," and George gathered various reports, but it was all in vain. "So, I don't think you'll find anything new." Mandy glanced at the door again. "Granny, have you seen the picture in Mom's locket?" "Of course, and I know that it's your missing little sister." Lydia remembered that she had a daughter with the same name as you, Mandy. Lydia gradually pieced together fragments of her past life. Initially, this process occurred on the associative level, but after sessions of hypnotherapy with a psychologist, she learned how to extract necessary facts from her memory's recesses. George had been by her side for all these 15 years. At first, he hadn't expected that simple human sympathy would one day turn into strong affection. With his inherent reserve, he asked her to stay, and she agreed. He spoke romantically and confessed, "Lydia, you're my talisman. With your presence in my life, everything changed. Even the everyday things I started to see differently." She enjoyed hearing these words. However, the white spots in her memory still troubled her. "George, you don't really know me at all. I don't even know what's beyond the horizon of my amnesia. What if I'm a criminal and the police are looking for me? It's highly unlikely that you were part of that world. But you were definitely associated with science." "Why do you say that?" The men hesitated. "I didn't want to tell you back then, but when we found you and you were in a terrible state, my mother's friend recommended a full examination. They were concerned about certain symptoms." "George, I remember that quite well, but I didn't tell you about the results of those tests back then, which baffled the doctors." "I see. What was strange about them?" "Some anomalies, particularly the blood test results, didn't match the norms. I once studied to be a paramedic, and I know that these kinds of deviations can occur after exposure to radiation. That's why I thought you were somehow connected to scientific work." This revelation became the starting point that helped the woman remember some details from her past life. Lydia recalled working in a laboratory at a research institute. However, she found out that this institute had ceased to exist. She also remembered her husband, who had abandoned her to pursue his career. She hadn't tried to find him, and she couldn't forgive him for his betrayal. The return to her past was slow, and certain details refused to resurface. This process was very painful, and one day, Lydia confessed to her husband, "George, I've begun to fear my own past because I don't know what awaits me tomorrow. I even fear going to sleep because that's when new memories seem to creep in." Her husband tried to comfort her. "You need to focus on today. You can't keep looking back all the time. It might drive you mad. You have a family. We all love you and worry about you." She looked at her husband tenderly. "George, thank you. You have no idea what you've done for me. You've given me new hope, and that's priceless." With a lifted spirit, George, Mandy, and Lydia drove in the car. George spent the entire journey telling his wife and daughter about the upcoming anniversary celebration. "We worked on the anniversary program with my partner. After all, 15 years is a significant milestone, and we need to celebrate it in style." "What do you think?" Mandy exclaimed enthusiastically. "Dad, you are right. We should throw a grand celebration. Pleased with his daughter's praise, the businessman proudly added, everything has already been arranged. By the way, Mandy, we've invited artists to the celebration, so you won't get bored. You'll even have a little friend with whom you can chat. This news intrigued Lydia. I'm curious, who is this young lady? Lydia, you might have forgotten, but I told you about Oliver's daughter. Mary is currently studying at the Art Academy. They say she's talented, a very nice girl. Although she's 5 to 6 years older than Mandy, I don't think the age difference should be an obstacle to mutual understanding. George's prediction came true. As soon as Lydia saw Mary, she felt an irresistible magnetic pull toward her. The event was taking place at one of the city's largest restaurants, and the place was so crowded that it was difficult to move around. The family arrived a bit late for the official part of the event, so the girls' introduction took place after the formalities. George soon noticed that something was amiss with his wife. Lydia was looking at Victoria and Oliver's daughter, behaving beyond the boundaries of etiquette. He leaned closer to his wife's ear and whispered, Lydia, what's going on? You look so distant. Lydia shook off her daze and forced a strained smile. It's nothing, it'll pass, just a bit of an odd feeling. To calm her nerves, Lydia stepped aside where Victoria was standing. Victoria, who was also closely watching the two girls, was the first to ask, Is this your daughter? Lydia replied, Yes, Mandy. She's our joy and happiness. I've heard that your daughter is making strides in the arts. Victoria looked at her new acquaintance and smiled. Mary has never separated from her sketchbook and colored pencils since she was a child. My husband and I decided to send her to the School of Visual Arts, and then she entered the academy herself. Our daughter is only 14, but she has already chosen her path. She wants to become a biologist. I used to work in that field too, but various events happened, Lydia said, reflecting. Lydia fell silent, and Victoria kindly embraced her by the shoulders. It's best not to dwell on unpleasant moments. My husband and I also had many difficult days, but then the Lord blessed us with Mary, and life changed. The women wanted to continue their conversation, but the event organizer invited everyone into the banquet hall. Taking advantage of a moment alone, the two girls secluded themselves and whispered to each other. In the evening, as they prepared for bed, Mandy asked her mother, Mom, is it true that every mother can feel her child from a distance? Yes, for example, I'm always worried about you, Lydia replied. The girl sighed. I didn't mean that. Tell me, did you feel anything special tonight? Lydia's insides turned cold, and a worried George tried to stop their daughter with a meaningful look. But it was already too late. Mandy said in a single breath, Mary and I have been communicating through social media for a while. In fact, that's why I agreed to this trip. So, I have every reason to believe that Mary is my sister. It's just that her parents are keeping it from her. Lydia rushed to the door. Oh my God. I felt it. George, take me to them quickly. Her husband gave her a stern look. Mandy, couldn't you have waited until morning? Do you understand how this news might affect your mother? The girl already regretted her impulsive words, but there was no taking them back. She went to the hallway, where Lydia was crying, and George was trying to comfort her. Suddenly, the phone rang. George picked up the receiver. He listened carefully to the late-night caller and then said thoughtfully, It was Oliver. He said we need to meet tomorrow. Lydia stopped crying and looked at her husband with a questioning expression. What did he say? Let's postpone the discussion of all serious matters until tomorrow. I can only say one thing, modern kids are something else. It's just a shame that they don't always think about the consequences of their actions. Nicholas had a completely different vision of his return home. He struggled to get into his apartment because it had been sealed due to unpaid utility bills. Moving with difficulty on his crutches, he went to inquire about the debt. But when they told him the total amount, he felt faint. He tried to explain to the supervisor, Understand, I spent over 15 years in another country. The supervisor looked at him indifferently. Well, you could have stayed there. Why did you come here? Nicholas pointed at his crutches. Considering my physical condition, I can offer you a repayment plan. The debt isn't too substantial. Payments were regularly made over the years. Only last year, they stopped. My father used to pay. I sent him the money. But he passed away last year. Okay, I'll try to pay it off as soon as possible. Can I still live in my apartment? The supervisor realized his oversight. Yes, of course, just write a receipt. Nicholas was confident that he could find some kind of work. However, no matter where he turned, people looked at him with surprise. We can't offer you anything that would allow you to work full-time. Unfortunately, all job openings involve physical labor, they told him. After 3 months of fruitless searching, Nicholas was feeling utterly defeated. He didn't even have money for bread, and he had nowhere to turn for help. Even after the first few weeks of failure, he started calling his former friends and colleagues, but no one wanted to lend money to a man without a steady job. One day, he was strolling down the street on his crutches, feeling utterly downcast. He felt such a strong urge to drink that he approached a liquor store. A man of intellectual appearance there eyed him cautiously and handed him 50 euros. Here, take this, just don't bother me, the man said. Nicholas was surprised. I haven't even said a word to you. The man glanced at the store's door and then back at Nicholas. I know you're kind. It's better to give you money right away than to get beaten up later. Nicholas asked, do people often beat you up? So far, just once, but it was quite unpleasant. I've learned that lesson for life. Nicholas looked at the stranger hopefully. Listen, friend, want to have a drink? I don't indulge much, but life has tossed me around so much that I'm really craving one. The man looked around. In principle, I'm not against it. But where can we sit? I have a whole 3-room apartment nearby. It's just around the corner. The stranger's face reddened with joy. I'll be right there. Nicholas had been drinking all night with Charlie, the generous acquaintance. In his intoxicated state, he didn't notice that his companion would pick up the shot glass but then set it back on the table. Nicholas confided in Charlie about his circumstances, and Charlie promised to help him with money. He kept his promise, visiting every day, bringing food and drinks along. This continued for a month. One day, Charlie arrived not alone but with a hefty guy. Charlie said in a friendly tone, Well, Nicholas, it's time for us to settle our accounts. You worked in the trading sector, right at the top, and you should know that nothing in this life is free. Nicholas realized that the situation was turning against him, and he underscored this point, gesturing to the burly man who was ostentatiously flexing his fists. He pleaded, Charlie, please, just give me a little more time. You know I don't have the money right now. Charlie, you could sell something, like your apartment, for a good amount. Why do you need such a big place all to yourself? You'd be comfortable in a 1-bedroom. Besides, you could clear your debts with that. Nicholas listened to Charlie's voice and nodded. To make the client more amenable, Charlie pulled out some documents from his bag and then a bottle. Nicholas, sign the document first, and then you'll get your drink. Nervously anticipating, Nicholas signed the document. After signing the contract, he went out of commission for a few days. He was brought back to reality by a persistent knock on the door. In a daze, he made his way to the door on his crutches. When he opened it, he was greeted by entirely unfamiliar faces. An elderly man confronted him. Sir, what are you doing here? I live here. This is my apartment, Nicholas replied. The man shoved some papers in his face. No, this is already my apartment. As for you, get out if you don't want me to call the police. These people didn't even allow Nicholas to collect his belongings. The assertive man pushed him out the door, paying no attention to his disability. While he was coming to terms with this unexpected turn of events, the new tenant's wife dumped his belongings outside. Nicholas yelled throughout the whole building, "But this is my apartment." A lady poked her head out of a nearby door. "Go scream somewhere else." At first, Nicholas had hoped to meet Charlie to reverse the apartment sale process. He knew the laws quite well and was aware that he had this option. However, Charlie seemed to have disappeared. Nicholas waited outside the store where he'd last seen Charlie for several days, but the man seemed to have vanished into thin air. He ran into the old acquaintance completely by accident in a park. Charlie had vision problems and didn't notice him right away. Leaning on one crutch, Nicholas lifted him off the ground. "Where are my money?" he demanded. Charlie whimpered, "What money? Everything's above board. I gave you drinks, food, paid your utility bills. All honestly. What more do you want from me? Let go or I'll scream." With a forceful shove, Nicholas pushed Charlie onto a bench. It was the darkest period in his life. Nicholas spent nights at train stations and in parks, his hunger driving him to begging. He bitterly discovered that even among the homeless, there was a constant battle for a spot in the sun. Several times, he was beaten by vagabonds for encroaching on their territory, and once they did it quite severely. They even took his crutches. Passersby found him on the street and called an ambulance, which took him to the hospital. Nicholas didn't want to think about how he would continue to live. He'd already made up his mind, and to prepare for the inevitable, he mentally repeated, "As soon as I'm discharged from the hospital, I'll end it all. I have no other options." Indeed, for a 45-year-old disabled person, there didn't seem to be any viable solutions. He couldn't find work, lost his only housing, and he was grateful that they had given him his old crutches in the hospital. The valuable gift was brought to his ward by a nurse the day before his discharge. "Here, take them, they're yours for life," she said. He grinned. There's nothing eternal on this earth. Mandy and Mary were far from discussing philosophical matters. When all the details from the past came to light, the girls were initially shocked. Their parents were equally stunned. Victoria even had a heart attack. She cried and kept repeating, "They'll take Mary away from us." Oliver reassured his wife, saying, "They won't take her because Mary is an adult and has the right to choose with whom she wants to live." But the young woman wanted to stay with those who had raised her. "Lydia, that is, Mom, please forgive me, but I can't abandon my parents. Please don't be angry with me. I'm glad to have two mothers now, and both of you are real. And it's great to have a little sister." Lydia was moved and tried to maintain her composure. She understood that after all these years, it was impossible to change anything. She looked at the two girls with eyes filled with love. Two daughters. Two Mandys. Victoria was also in tears. "When we found her in the forest, we asked for her name, but she was saying something incomprehensible. That's when Ariel and I, her grandmother, thought her name was Mary. Turns out, it's Mandy. My ex-husband always called our daughter Mandy because she was so little," added Mary. The older of the two girls asked, "Have you, Mom, ever tried to find him?" Mary immediately regretted her question as she saw the silent horror in Lydia's eyes. "No, I don't even want to think about that person. If it weren't for his despicable act, none of this would have happened to us," Victoria whispered. "But then I wouldn't have found my Mary." The girls took a stroll through the evening city. Mary suggested the idea of capturing the evening city on canvas. "You can't imagine how fantastic the river looks when the lights of the evening city glide across its surface. I've been thinking about this theme for a while, but just couldn't find the time. Now, you and I will find a suitable spot." Mandy shouted. "Mary, wait, did I just imagine that, or is there really someone on the bridge?" The artists dropped their easels on the ground and rushed to the bridge. Mandy yelled, "Sir, please, no." The man looked in their direction and then tried to heave his body over the railing. He was in a great hurry, and due to his clumsy movement, one side of his coat got caught on the railing, and something rectangular slid out of his pocket. At that very moment, the girls arrived. They grabbed the skinny man from both sides and pulled him to safety. Mandy burst into tears from the overwhelming emotions. "Sir, how could you? You can't do this." Mary was less emotional. "Tell us, maybe my sister and I can help you with something. Do you have any family? Let us call them." The man shook his head in desperation. "My family? They are right there." He nodded toward the crutches, which remained leaning against the railing. Mandy handed the man his means of mobility. "You shouldn't have saved me, girls. I'm not worthy of it. I belong in hell." Suddenly, Mandy noticed the bright rectangle. "Oh, is this a picture?" She extended the photograph to Nicholas. The man held the card to his chest. "Thank you, girls. This is all I have left of my happy life. Who would have thought on that day that it would all end so quickly? This is my wife and our daughter, Mandy." Nicholas handed the photograph to the elder of the two girls. Her eyes welled up with tears. Trembling hands took hold of the picture, and she immediately recognized the outfit with the funny bunnies. Victoria, Mandy's mother, had kept it in a showbox all these years. There was also the light jacket. Mary stared at this helpless man with a heart torn into pieces. It's me. "So, you're my father." Mandy observed the scene with a mesmerized look and said, It's just like in an Indian movie. When the girls brought the crippled men with crutches into the house, Victoria was speechless. Mary, who is this? Mary had somewhat recovered from the shock. Mom, please don't worry, and don't say anything to Lydia yet. This is my biological father. We happened to save him. He was about to jump from a bridge. Victoria looked at her grown-up daughter in astonishment. Mary, but this man, Mary interrupted her firmly. Mom, please don't say anything. I know everything. Yes, he might not be deserving of pity, but even the most fallen person shouldn't be deprived of their last hope. Victoria couldn't move from her spot. Mary embraced her tightly. Mom, don't worry. Mandy and I have already arranged that her father will help him get back on his feet and find a job. Mandy did a great job. She scoured social media and found me. Mary's determination to help her biological father did not waver. With the support of her family and the loving encouragement of her mother, Victoria, they gave Nicholas a chance to turn his life around. He faced the consequences of his past actions and started the long journey to redemption. Mandy, the young artist with a deep sense of empathy, captured the essence of this transformation in her paintings. She used her art to express the story of a broken man finding hope and a chance for a fresh start. Her talent, combined with her newfound family bonds, allowed her to inspire others with her work. Over time, Nicholas mended the bridges he had burned and made amends for his past mistakes. Victoria and Mary helped him find the strength to confront his demons, make peace with his past, and move toward a brighter future. Mary continued to cherish both her mothers, Lydia and Victoria. Her bond with Mandy remained unbreakable, and they used their unique experience to advocate for compassion and understanding, proving that even in the darkest of circumstances, there could be opportunities for healing and renewal. The family's story became a testament to the power of forgiveness, second chances, and the love that can mend the most shattered souls. It reminded everyone that, ultimately, we are defined not by our past mistakes but by our capacity